What are the top 3 things that people you guide and coach and follow, you on social media, come to you for and say their number 1 issue is, oh, foreman, they do suffer from a lot of infidelity, with the women are cheating on the men. A lot more than I ever expected. That's blowing my mind. My number 1 client is a man who's just been cheated on by a woman. And because there's not much talk about this on social media, and there's not much talk about this in general, we're almost programmed to think men. So yeah, it's rare that you find the idea of women cheating and men don't actually talk to each other when they've been cheated on. They kind of keep it to themselves because they're almost more embarrassed or ashamed. Whereas women, we can confide in each other a bit more. So my number 1 client tends to be the man that's been cheated on, or the woman that can't get the man to commit. That tends to be the 2 fields I kind of have seemed to attract in terms of clients. But men getting cheated on, or men not being masculine enough, tends to be the common theme of my clients that keep coming back and back. Let's talk about both of those things, because they're both fascinating. So, let's start with men not being masculine enough. What does that mean? Because I think for a long time, we were hearing men are not feminine enough, or men don't show their emotions, or men can't have emotional connection. That's the issue. But you're actually saying it's the opposite. It's actually the opposite. And the genuine. Because look, we're living in a time, particularly in a city like LA, where men are almost divided into being too nice and not masculine enough, or toxic masculinity. There doesn't seem to be a middle ground. And men who have black masculinity, they have these 3 traits common in common that I noticed. Firstly, they grew up without a male role models. What may have happened is they grew up in a single parent home and they saw their mom making all the decisions, doing all the hard work, doing the emotional and physical labor. And they think that's what women want. They think that's okay. So when they go into relationships, they think that woman wants to make all the decisions. She wants to do everything around the house. She wants to be in control. When really, they're looking for a man whose decision they trust enough for them to finally be able to relax. But instead, they think that that's what women want. So, when they get into relationships, they're not decisive. They're not problem solving. They allow her to take complete lead, and they almost follow her too much. And at first, that might be fine. Women might find that a bit attractive. Like, okay, perfect. He's very docile and passive. But later on they find that man exhausting, particularly when they have children. They can't rely on him to make any decisions because he's almost doesn't trust his own judgment, and he doesn't have that protective or provider instinct. So she kind of has to end up doing a jaw roll. But the biggest thing I find with men that lack masculinity is they have a problem setting boundaries. And the effective way to set a boundary is to find the perfect balance between being stern and sensitive. What some men will be is too stern, and they'll want to set a boundary, and they get abusive at the same time. They're like, you can't do this. You're so, and they name call, and they get too much too stern. Other men are too sensitive. They get too soft with it, so they don't know how to set it. They allow any kind of behavior, and then they kind of suppress what they're truly feeling. To get the right balance, you have to be stern with what you want from that person, but be really sensitive to her needs and understand what she wants, and remind her how much you love her and you want to save this relationship. And that's why you're setting the boundary. So it might be something like if she's talking to an ex or something like that, he might be stern and saying, I don't feel comfortable that you're talking to an ex. But the sensitive part is because I love you and I really want this relationship to work and I really want us to have a healthy pattern. I don't want any outside interference. So getting that balance is something that guys that suffer with masculinity don't get right. And if they could just get that perfect balance of sternness and sensitivity, they'll be able to set boundaries a lot better. Yeah, it's your right. I've seen the abusive for sure. I've seen a lot of men who feel like they just want a submissive partner who does what they want when they want, and there's no love in there. There's no actual love there. They're setting all these boundaries, but they're aggressive with it. They're not reminding her that they love her. They didn't even show her that they love her, but they want her to obey him. That's no way to set a boundary. And other men are just too on the soft side. And then she forgets what he actually truly wants, because he's kind of people-pleasing. So finding that balance is something that's become difficult. Yeah, it's so interesting you said that, because I was thinking about, so my mom was the breadwinner in my house, and she did everything for me and my sister, and my dad was aloof. He was kind of checked out. And it's so interesting you said female role model piece, because two things happened for me. One thing was my male role models were monks who were really good men. And then on the other side, I saw my mom strain and struggle and pain. And that made me want to be a better man. But that's because she was vulnerable with me about it. So because I could see that my mom didn't have an easy life, I was convinced that when I got married, if I ever got married, that I would never let my wife work that hard. But that's a really common trait that the other type of man experienced. Some men, because they saw their mom really struggle, they just want to relieve their partner of all struggles. So the other way that they can go is that they want to save a lot of women, and what ends up happening is that they really want to make sure that she has not rubbles, and she lives a life of complete comfort. The problem is, when you remove all struggle from anybody's life, they lose purpose, and they actually resent you for not allowing them to problem solve themselves. So many men in that position, what they end up doing, I'm not saying this is you, but generally, sometimes those men, they want to protect their partner from any kind of pain and stress. And in the process of doing that, they can either become a bit people-pleasing or just solve every problem that she could potentially have either, or she doesn't actually get to fulfill her own potential, and it can lead to resentment. So either way, unfortunately, the lack of male role model has a significant impact on how they behave with women. Yeah, I love that perspective, and it's such a fine line. And I would argue that probably while I was dating, I was that kind of guy. It was only when I got married to Radi did I upgrade to actually realizing that I needed my partner to also pursue her purpose, discover what it was, understand it, and then that took a while. Yeah, and did you find that? Do you have that habit? Because a lot of men in that position, sometimes they'll choose women that are heavily traumatized, or they choose women that have never had any work, and no work, or they might choose somebody who is just really struggling with some addictions. And they like that because then they're like, I can just show you and help you recover. But the problem is, sometimes when those women do recover, they want a man with higher self-esteem, somebody who wouldn't tolerate so much of that negative behavior. So they actually, so sometimes I'll meet men who, like, she had this addiction. She was an alcoholic. She was traumatized from sexual abuse. I helped her get through all of it. But when she's recovered, she's actually looking at him like, why did you tolerate all of that? Why did you select this? There must be something wrong with you. I actually want somebody who's got a higher selection process. Now, sometimes they can lose that woman that they have, and women suffer from this as well. They think that if I just show him I'm consistent, caring, and loving, I get him through the addictions. When he finally recovers, he actually looks for somebody with higher self-esteem, and they end up all that investment can sometimes go to waste. But isn't that so heartbreaking? It is because that was love in its best form. If someone was patient while you healed and they supported you, like, aren't we moving away from love if we leave someone who is there for us in our darkest times? They are. But sometimes they don't know if you were there because you love them or you're seeking their approval. And a lot of people, sometimes they are approval seeking and master that through helping, they will help that person financially, help that person with every single problem that they have. But there's an unconscious contract that the more I help you, the more you will love me in return. And sometimes we can see through it when it's not genuine. And when that person can see through that this was all done with a contract assigned to it, that one day you will then be loyal, loving, and committed to me. They didn't agree to sign that contract. So when they're healed, they can become ungrateful to the person that helped them. Yeah, that makes so much sense. Yeah. So it just depends what the unconscious contract is when you're helping people. I love that unconscious contract. Yeah, you're so right that if you're doing it just to say, look, I was there for you. I was there the whole time. You should love me more now. People sense that. People sense that. How do you communicate to someone that you're there for the right reasons? But you have those boundaries. So how you communicate? 'Cause I suffer from that as well. I like to be super helpful because then I'm so irreplaceable. If I do all of these things, I'm so irreplaceable. And there's unconscious ego attached to that. It's like, look how wonderful I am because I saw you through all your financial woes and all this stuff. But really, the best way to communicate that you're there for love and not for approval is that you still have deal breakers. Where people go wrong is that they are literally a doormat. There's nothing you can do that will make them ever leave. Whereas where you're still loving, but you're not approval seeking there's a limit to how much you can take. And if there's not at least gratitude, respect, honor, and loyalty, you will leave. Whereas, if you have no deal breakers whatsoever, and you're just consistently loving this person who is just taking from you, it signals low self-esteem to that person, and it signals an incorrect attachment. You know what? I love talking to you because there's just everything you're talking about is like getting into the real nuance. Like there's this gray layer of between of all these ideas, and that's really what makes all the difference. If you ever want to prevent yourself from getting cheated on, it's not so much that you have to spot the red flags in the other person. Sometimes you can become a person who never gets cheated on. No matter what relationship you goon, you can become immunized to it. It's really difficult for the woman with good intentions to find a man in this day and age. The woman that's not prepared to lead sexually and lead with that, she finds herself being overlooked by the women that are. The men that are pushed into commitment tend to resent their partners for making them a married man. They get angry at small signs of intimacy. They get annoyed that they have to be loving to you. They get annoyed that they have to check in with you every day and tell you what time they're coming home and what time dinner's going to be ready. They resent the patterns of being married. As I'm listening to you, the question that's coming to my mind is, we all seem to think we know why men cheat on women. Why do women cheat on men? I've gotten in a lot of trouble for saying this in the past, and I'll say it again. Usually in my experience of when women cheat on men, it's not so much that you know he's done something toxic. I've met women who are in toxic relationships and stayed loyal the whole time. It's simply when he lacks masculinity, they are most likely to cheat. I don't actually see women often cheating on a toxic man. They're actually quite loyal to him. They're more likely to cheat on a man that is too passive, too naive, and too people-pleasing. And the reason for that is because there's something about that man that is so soft, so naive, that makes you lose sexual attraction. Something about the fact that he can't spot red flags. Something about the fact that he believes everything. He doesn't question anything. He's afraid to assert his boundaries makes a woman crave somebody with a bit more masculinity. So, it's not so much that they're cheating on him because he's so bad to her. 'Cause I've met so many women saying, he's a wonderful man. He treats me really well. I'm just not in love with him. And usually the reason why she's not in love with him is because he's not protective enough. And what some men will provide. But what we mean by protective is she might be out all day with her ex-boyfriend, and he won't get protective and say, "Hey babe, look, no, I don't feel comfortable." Or she might be doing, disrespect to him or anything like that, and he doesn't stand up for himself. And in those moments when a man doesn't stand up for himself, she loses that respect, and then she crosses new boundaries, because mainly she believes he will stay, regardless. And when we give our partners the belief that regardless of how you behave, I will forgive and maintain consistent, I'll love you regardless, we think we're showing them unconditional love. But what they'll end up doing is thinking that we are going to tolerate unconditional disrespect, and they end up just pushing our boundaries more and more. So what does he do? So what he does is make sure he's aware of when he's being disrespected. And we naturally, human beings in general, and I think this is men and women, if you ever want to prevent yourself from getting cheated on, it's not so much that you have to spot their flags in the other person. Sometimes you can become a person who never gets cheated on. No matter what relationship you go on, you can become immunized to it. And the way to become immunized to being cheated on is number 1, understanding your partner's true needs. Understanding what they actually need in a relationship and asking yourself, can I commit to that? So, some people will be in a relationship with somebody who's got a really high sex drive. They just can't meet that need. If you know you can't, at some point that relationship's going to suffer. Or sometimes you might meet a partner who really needs financial support and you can't meet that need. At some point, that relationship will break down. So, understand your partner's true needs. The second thing is knowing that if they did cheat on you, you would leave. If you give the signals to your partner that you wouldn't leave no matter what, they do, and you don't meet the needs of each other, chances are that relationship will end in infidelity. But if you meet each other's needs and you have a rule, both of you have a particular rule, like if it did happen, I'm going to leave. There's no two ways about it. Chances are your partner won't take that risk. They only take that risk when they believe unconsciously you're going to accept their behavior, regardless of what they do. And the signals of that come earlier on. So it might be early signals that you catch that they're still on Tinder. You forgive them. You go through their phone. You find that they're still talking to other people. You forgive them. You forgive the footsteps too many times. I'm not saying you become toxic and don't forgive anything, but you let them know that this behavior is not something I tolerate. You can do it, no problem, but I'm not going to stick around for it. When they learn that you mean what you say, they'll naturally improve. But if they see that you make a big hoo-ha, you scream and shout, but you actually tolerate more and more disrespect, you give them the signal that you'll accept any behavior, and they start taking more risks. If it's the wrong person, what happens when someone is not in an abusive way, but they are disrespecting you? You make them aware that they're disrespecting you in an assertive way, but they keep doing it. What do you do when you can't change others? You have to change yourself, and the only thing you can do is withdraw and remove access. Unfortunately, that's the only way to teach people how to treat you correctly, is you remove the perks of being with you. And and some people are scared to do that because they worry, then I'll lose them. But you'll lose a person who's going to continuously get more disrespectful. So what is the 3M method? This is a program that I'm launching actually very soon. And here what I do is I teach men just 3 factors on how to have really healthy relationships. First one is mastering yourself. You can never have a healthy relationship without a healthy relationship with yourself. Without self-esteem and self-confidence, there's no point dating. Then you have to master women. Women speak a completely different language, and men believe them. What they say they want and what they unconsciously reward are completely different. And the final thing is mastering relationships, where you understand communication, conflict resolution. How do relationships work? If you come out of a relationship and you have good memories, good years, and beautiful kids, it's not a failure. I've relationships. You're coming out of it with lowered self-esteem, broken homes, depression, anxiety. Those are the failures. And that's where I come in with relationship skills.